Cool. So, yes, let's get introductions then. So, Peter, if you want to tell me a little bit
Hello.
about yourself and a bit about your background in your career.
All right. So my name's Peter Chapman. I've been composing for film and TV since around 2003, I think was when I kind of first started. I started doing ads when I was in my early 20s. Uh, and that kind of, I built up a small resume of ads and then ended up meeting a music supervisor named Andrea Higgins, who kind of took a liking to my music and ended up hiring me on some projects here and there. And uh, yeah, one thing led to another, and I ended up landing some gigs. Did work in Moms, Winona Earp, a whole bunch of Reno shows, and that's kind of what led me here to SkyMed.
I love Working Mums. It's one of my favorite shows.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
And you got a very cool setup, I'd just like to add.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, it's very cool. So how did you find working on Working Mums? What episodes and things did you work with that, and what was the process like with that?
So working Moms, I did the whole series. So it was 7 seasons, and it started off. They didn't really even want a composer at the beginning. They wanted to just do licensed music. My understanding is this is what happened. But Canadian budgets being what they were,
Mm.
that was gonna get expensive pretty fast unless they wanted to basically score the whole thing with library tracks, which people tend to not want to
Mm.
do. So they brought myself and a good friend of mine named Maylee Todd in to kind of like on one part create the sound of the show, but then there was also a fair amount of us creating bits of music that were kind of supposed to sound like record stings or needle drops. And yeah, it was a really fun show. The first few seasons were pretty difficult. It was a bit of a learning curve on that particular project, but by season 7, it was so fun, and it was like the whole post team was such a well-oiled machine by season 7. It was an amazing project to work on. And sonically, we ended up doing a lot of the score. It was very kind of pop. It was like a mixture of like pop production, a lot of modern hip hop production, and then a lot of found sounds and kind of vocal tonalities, which was just a lot of Malin Todd kind of yelling crazy stuff. Uh, we would make libraries of her kind of yelling and shouting and making weird percussive sounds, and then I would have those all at my fingertips. So when we were writing, I could just kind of grab my Maylee Todd patches and play her on the keyboard. It was pretty fun.
Nice. So I'll just move on to Victoria. So if you want to say a little bit about your background, and how you got into the music supervision side of
Mhm.
things before we move on to SkyMed.
Yeah, sure. So I'm from Australia. When I was in Australia, I played bass, and we would come over to Canada and, organize our own little tours. And I ended up meeting my partner in Australia who's from Canada. Um, and I've just finished up my law degree in Australia, and then I decided to come and move here. It was easier to get a visa for Canada, than for her to get one for Australia. So when I was here, I was like sort of Googling like what can I do with a law degree where I don't have to go back to school and something to do with music. And I came across music supervision, which has like a lot of the transferable
Mm.
skills. And then I was like, okay, the only way is to get an internship somewhere. So I was like, reached out to sort of everyone in Toronto and reached out to Last Gang Records. And so they said, yeah, you can come and intern here because Chris Taylor, who owned the label, he was a lawyer. So that's sort of how I got in there. And then started doing that, wanting to focus on music supervision, not so much sync. And then after a couple of years, Last Game got sold to Entertainment One, and then I started working full time as a music supervisor there. And then from there, they sold the music department. We became Monarch Music, and then I ended up going to work with Jody Calero at the Wilders, and he just gave me SKYMED as something to work on there.
And what a great asset, though, to have as a legal background to bring with you to music supervision, because
yeah, it definitely helps.
Yeah.
Although I never actually worked as a lawyer in Australia, I finished up my placement in criminal law and then came over here.
Yeah, it's still though great to understand the legalities and stuff to be able to bring to that. So
yeah,
the Wilders then, like, that's fairly recent, isn't it, that you moved over?
Yeah, since 2012. Sorry, 2022.
Cool. So let's like discuss then with both you, like, how you both then became involved with SKYMED and what drew you to the project individually.
You want me to go
Well,
first?
for me, I guess it was something that Jody was like, "Here, do you want to work on this show?" I was like, "Sure."
Like, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's all there is for that. Yeah.
And yeah, what about you?
My involvement was it was a little bit of a weird one. So I had worked with Rob Carley on a couple of other shows before. We'd done Winona Earp, and we had done a short-lived show called Fortunate Son. So he and I have a history of working together, and we work together really well. And what had actually happened was SKYMED had already hired a composer, and it wasn't working out for a couple of different reasons. And it was it was brought to us, and it was kind of like we're already kind of halfway through episode 3. We're in a jam. Can you guys just like pitch something for this? Just on the just can you just like throw us, So it was kind of a Hail Mary moment. And to be perfectly honest, I wasn't sure that it was a project I wanted to do based solely on the temp of the show. It just wasn't vibing with me, and the score that the other composer had done wasn't really vibing with me, and it was sort of being treated like a real procedural kind of show, like a real like cops and medical people doing cops and medical things, and that just like wasn't something that I was particularly interested in. Like I wasn't excited about doing it. So I actually talked to my manager about it, and he was like, how about just write the kind of music that you would be stoked to write for the next 5 years if they hired you. Like don't try to fulfill what you think their vision is. Write what you want to do for the show. And so I ended up we had like one night we put together a demo, which was it ended up being the very first scene of episode 1, and sent it in, and they really liked it. So we were brought in, and we had like a week to basically replace most of the cues in the first 2.5 episodes, and it was a little bit of a wild ride, but
wow.
But yeah, it was fun because I mean, between the two of us, we collaborate really well together, and the sound of SKYMED is not too far from the shorthand that we developed during Winona Earp, in the fact that it's like a sort of synthesizer, like a synthesis or orchestral hybrid. So yeah, so that was how we actually we kind of got thrown into the fire at the 11th hour.
Wow. Yeah, gotta love that pressure. But what a great bit of advice though from your manager as well.
Yeah, it's something I try to do, like I try to think about, because it's so easy when you're pitching on a show to write what you think they want. And it just seems like anytime I do, anytime I try to write, like I try to think like, oh, it's this kind of show. They probably want this kind of music. Anytime I've done that, it just doesn't come out right. Whereas anytime I write something that I'm just really excited about, it always comes out way better. And you don't get stuck writing a weird style of music that you don't really like for five
Yeah.
seasons.
And sometimes they don't actually know what they really want until they hear it.
And I think that was the case with this. I think everyone thought it was going to be this sort of procedural show. But what Rob and I brought to it was, I don't think that. So, yeah.
And so describe how Peter, how you and Victoria like both collaborated together to create, the musical landscape for SKYMED. Like, how did you really focus on the collaboration side of things with that?
I mean, I don't know that there's a lot of crossover. There will definitely be times where, like, we'll have a meeting at the beginning and Victoria will discuss the tunes that they want to put in, and we'll figure out where we're going to put stuff in. And then there have definitely been points where they've had us both do stuff like, Victoria, you put a song here for this montage. Peter and Rob, why don't you write something? And then whoever wins kind of gets it. And then there have also been times where our cues might flow in and out of the music that Victoria's licensing. So there have been times where we'll have her send over the stuff so we can put it in our sessions and kind of work around it. Because there have definitely been some times where like a cue will end and then it'll bleed in totally the wrong key right into the source music and it'll be this train wreck. I think that's like on SKYMED, I think that's probably about the extent of our collaboration. Is that accurate, Victoria?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
So yeah, Victoria, like how did you approach like SKYMED differently to how you approach other projects? Do you start working from, say, the script stages and start scoping out where, you start looking at what kind of songs will fit well in different scenes at that point? Like, describe the process for you working on the show.
Yeah, so it's me and another supervisor who works with us, Tiffany Sue. She's based in LA. And so and Jody as well, but it's mainly Tiff and I. So usually we'll get the scripts, we'll read them, we'll spot them and sort of make a note of any scripted songs or music moments. We know that because we didn't do the first season, but we did season 2. So now we're into season 3. We know like the Whiskey Hatch is going to have your sort of country bluesy music in the background. And there's like the high stakes scenes, they're going to have kind of promo friendly pop rock exciting stuff. So what we'll do is, and this is different to other shows that we've worked on, we'll reach out to licensors and send them some details and get them to submit music that will clear for X amount, knowing the budgets stay the same generally each season. And we'll just sort of gather big bins of music and send them to the editors ahead of time so that when we're doing the music spotting sessions, they've already dropped in music that we know is clearable and that the showrunner likes. It's and so other series, other series we sort of don't really send music ahead of time, perhaps because there's maybe a lot more scripted songs mentioned and we know there's going to be a lot more discussion about it. I really like how we do it in SKYMED. It makes things like run really smoothly.
Yeah, I like to work on projects that you can really get involved with from like as early stages as possible, especially because with major songs as well can take time to clear. So what ratio compared to, say, like major artists songs are used in comparison to, say, more indie type music? What kind of ratio was used in comparison?
I guess we do use a lot of indie music, not necessarily from like major labels and publishers, but mini majors, sync agents and stuff like that. There's going to be a few big needle drops that we'll hear about at the start of the season. We're already starting to clear stuff for that. But yeah, I guess it would lean towards sort of more lesser known artists
Yeah.
with a few big ones, yeah.
And so do you also then mainly work with the sync agents for the independent artists? Like where would you go to find music for that? Is it typically sync agents, indie labels, or do you deal with
Yeah.
artists directly? Do you use any like royalty-free music when you really need to make the budget stretch, or do you like tend to stay away? And AI as well, because starting to get a few suggestions of people that want to submit AI. So where are you on that side of things as well?
Well, we haven't really had to deal with that yet. But it is reaching out mainly to sync agents. I don't think we've really gone to any artists themselves unless they're like, hey, we want to use a cover of this song by this artist, then I'll look into that. But yeah, generally it is just reaching out to a lot of people that we have good relationships with. We know they have the right music for the show. And it'll clear for the budget, a lot of one stops, which is really handy because some episodes feature a lot of music and some might only have one or two needle drops. And then we will fill some spots with library music.
Yeah. And how much compared, like in terms of scenes, do you have to then is a battle between say instrumental score or if it's going to be an instrumental like song to string episodes together or full song, because I know sometimes like it's unsure as to whether they're going to use like score in a certain scene or whether they're going to use a song there, or does that happen quite a lot?
I reckon there's a lot of score in this series. Would you say, Peter? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably one of the most score heavy. Like um I don't think Rob and I with the deadlines could do this show on our own. Like I think we need to be a team just because like some of these episodes are what we'll call wall to wall, where it's just like the music just starts and just goes all the way to the end. And in addition to that, the score, because there's so many heavy action sequences, those sequences take a lot of time. So I would say there's definitely a lot of score for sure.
And did you find like there was a lot of like notes, a lot of revisions going on during, with the score? Or was it typically you're on the same page and got the vision and it was pretty much on point a lot of the time?
I think we're usually pretty on the same page. Most any notes that we get are usually like just like very fine detail notes. It's very rarely is it like rewrite this scene. Usually it's just very subtle, like can you just switch the mood a little bit more at this point or whatever. But yeah, I mean we have a great kind of vocabulary with the showrunner and the editor, and I wouldn't say it's too bad.
Yeah. And what's like a standout piece of score that you've written, that you've particularly been, really pleased with, that a score that you've done that relates to a particular scene that you're like, yeah, I'm really, really
There
a standout moment?
There are a few. I mean the one in like season one, episode one, the opening sequence was a really fun one, and I think it was just like that was what we used to pitch, and I know that one resonated a lot with the showrunner, so that's something that we kind of refer back to. But in the last season, there's a sequence. Victoria, you might be able to help me. I can't remember what episode it was, but it was when the character who was played by Danny Kind hits the moose and they kind of have to choose
Yeah.
between her or the daughter. It was one of the later
Hmm.
episodes, like maybe around
Yeah,
like
I think
episode 8.
let me see if I can.
Mm.
I think, yeah, episode 8. That's right, because we had to find like a
Episode
pop song that they were singing in the car.
right. So yeah,
Mhm.
that one, because it was a really long sequence. Like if I recall, I think that cue was about 5 or 6 minutes long, and it kept going back and forth between different scenes, and it would cut back to the car accident and cut back, and it was this really emotional moment where like the kids crying and the mom's screaming, and I don't know, there was like
Mm.
there was a lot going on, and I remember feeling I was really excited about that cue when I finished it. It was I think that's one of my favorite cues that I've written in that show
Yeah.
to date.
Nice. And what about you, Victoria? What's like your, most standout song that you've cleared, or particular scene that it just married up together so well?
It's kind of, I mean, I guess we had some good songs in season 2. There was like the drag bar
Mm.
um episode. There was just like a lot of music in that one. So just kind of making all of that work. And then yeah, that crash scene too was like we were trying to find a pop song that a young girl would be singing with her mom, and then we ended up going with Hello by Dragonette.
Mm.
That one worked really well, and that was because it had to be like something fun because no one knew what was going to happen, and then this moose appears. So that was also a fun one to do. But yeah, I can't. I mean, generally, it's pretty easy with the showrunner to find the song. It's never really like challenging. There's not like, oh, I'm not liking that. Like, sometimes you work on shows where you're like submitting playlists over and over and it's really hard to find like the perfect one.
Yeah.
Whereas this one, it just always sort of
It just
comes
flows.
together quite, yeah, it flows, it comes together really nicely. Um, so I guess, yeah, the ones I mentioned, they sort of stand out.
And when you're like looking at some of the more major artists that you're looking to spend, quite a bit of the budget on to begin with, do you carve out like what, the song A's, B's, and C's if song A's don't typically clear? Like, what's your process for that?
Um,
And then moving on to say the budget side of things. So first of
mhm.
all, like, do you have like multiple options, or do you just go for, say, these are my song A songs, and that's all I'm going to go for, and then figure out the rest after if it doesn't clear?
I guess what we will do is when we know we want like a big song, we'll reach out to like the major labels and say, this is our budget. Can you send us some ideas that will clear for this? And then we'll
Mm.
send them to the showrunner, and she'll usually pick like her top 2, and then we'll go out and clear them and see what they come back at. And then usually like in the last episode, like it happened in season 1 and 2, in season 2 we used Fix You by Coldplay. So that was one that she
Nice.
had said she would like. She wanted either we were going to find someone to do a cover of it, or I was just having a look online and found this version by Overcoats that was really beautiful version of the song, and shared that, and then they really liked that. So we got ahead of that one in time, knowing publishing was going to be a bit high. They
Mm.
approved the use of the cover, and then we sort of was able to work backwards from there with all the rest of the songs in the season. So yeah, when it comes to the big ones, we sort of have an idea of how much they're going to cost, so we
Yeah.
can plan for that. Yeah.
And then how do you go about then budgeting for like the rest of the budget for the rest, of the songs?
Mhm.
Because by then you would have scoped out probably how many songs that you need, for the episodes, right?
Yeah,
Um,
we sort of go divide the total by the number of episodes. So like, okay, we have this much for each episode. But then when we're going through it and like, oh, this episode only had 1 song versus the other episode had 12 songs. So now we know like we can save a bit more for these big ones in, the last couple of episodes or whatever. I don't know. It kind of just always works out.
that's
Um,
great.
and just say we were really over budget, I think they would they would say, okay, let's just lose this one song in this background scene. Maybe we'll replace it with a library track just to save like money there. But also the people that we do reach out to at the start of the season to get them to send music, they're aware of the budget. They're pitching music that's going to clear for the budget. And we just keep on top of it. We have a really good Excel sheet which calculates how much we spend and what's left. So we're just always keeping an eye on it and really aware of how much is left. Yeah.
And if you had any issues ever with clearances where, you know, a song has been used, and have you ever had any legal issues come out after, say, like, you know, a writer that wasn't, you know, that signed it off, that was like, hey, I own, you know, but that song, and I heard my song in the series. Have you ever had anything like that go down?
No, I've had
Luckily.
other similar really stressful things in other shows.
Yeah.
But no, not at all in SkyMed.
And so what other, let's touch base on that. What has been some of your like clearance nightmares that you've had separate from SkyMed? Because it seems like SkyMed has flowed like pretty well in that sense.
Yeah.
We've all had a clearance nightmare that work in supervision. What's your clearance nightmare?
I've had so many, like trying to get a visual vocal song cleared that they're filming like tomorrow. And then I actually just had one the other day on this series, Paid in Full, that we had been taking a long time to get all the Motown songs sorted. They were going back and forth with their lawyers and the archive team and making a bunch of edits. Then they finally approved all the Motown songs. And then I saw that there was like 16% with one writer for US only, that Sony didn't have that share, and I thought they had it 100%. So it was like, okay, who has it? I was able to track down the lawyer, and like I rang him and explained the situation. It was like, we're locking the episode today. And he's like, oh, no problem, I'll get it cleared for you. And it was like, thank God, because you don't want to be dealing with that on the day of picture lock, that you've been waiting so long to get things approved. And yeah, just another show, someone didn't get paid within like 7 days per their invoice, which is pretty insane. And then they were threatening to pull the song. So it was like, in the end, they didn't get paid because there was an error on their invoice. And we were like really trying to sort it out. And it got sorted in the end. But it's just those things that's just like you don't want to be dealing with on the day to day. And so it is really nice with SkyMed. It's just like, don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
So
let's
I have a really good clearance story if I can. I was privy to on another show we were working on where they were trying to license a specific Britney Spears song. And on this particular one, she had a writing credit, and they had everything signed off except they're literally just waiting for, like, Britney Spears has to personally sign off on this particular thing, and we're all sitting around waiting. And every time we have a meeting, they're like, "Has Britney signed off?" Like, no, Britney hasn't signed off. We haven't heard anything from Britney. Britney isn't returning the publisher's calls or the record label's calls. No one's heard from her. And while we're waiting, we're all kind of opening our Instagram, and this is when she was posting just some really wild, weird things on Instagram, and we all were kind of looking at it, going like, I don't think she's going to be signing off on this anytime soon. Like, it was pretty clear that her head, wherever it was not in signing this paper. And ultimately, she just ghosted on the whole thing, and they ended up going with something else.
Wow. So let's talk a little bit more about the creative process on the score. So let's talk like sound libraries and stuff. So what is your like go-to sound library that you tend to like to use? So I know you probably like different sound libraries for like different instruments and things, right? But let's talk a little bit more about the creative side of things for SkyMed. If you want to delve a little bit more into the creative aspects of your scoring process with that.
Yeah, so like one of the things, we had this idea early on where we thought it'd be really cool to come up with this hybrid score. It was like a lot of synthetic sounds, a lot of drum machines, a lot of synthesizers meshed with uh, orchestral stuff. So big horn sections, big string
Mm.
sections, all of that stuff. But we thought, like, how cool would it be if we treated the orchestra almost like it was another synthesizer, if that makes any sense.
Mm.
So what we've been doing, one of the ways we sort of make the orchestra sound really neat is we'll treat it. We do, if you listen to it, there's a lot of it's called side chaining, and
Mm.
that's the
Heard the
technical term,
term.
but it's sort of it's a term that, like, it's a sound that was made big by Daft Punk in the 90s, but it has now become kind of the standard practice of electronic music. And it's where the synthesizer is kind of pumping off of a kick drum. So you get this like rhythmic swelling. So when I'm writing, I'll often write these big orchestral movements, but then I'll sidechain them off of, like, there's a lot of four on the floor kick. So you'll have like this big orchestral thing going like dun, 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 but then the kick is just kind of doing this like dun, 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 dun. And so the orchestra is pumping along with that. So you end up getting this really unnatural sounding process on the orchestra. And so in terms of what we're using, I mean, Rob and I don't have identical rigs, but the I mean, yeah, it's a lot of Hans Zimmer strings, Junkie XL brass, Forzo brass, a lot of Spitfire stuff.
Mm.
A lot of the drums are coming from got the Junkie XL drums that I use, the Zimmer drums, a lot of the Heaviosity drums, and then just a lot of like electronic libraries. But then in addition, like, those are kind of the off the shelf stuff that I'll use, but I also have tons and tons of libraries that I've made with my modular synth, which will be a lot of these sort of weird atonal rhythmic looping elements that I'll often layer into the score. And then a lot of the synths that you hear are actually from, you can't see it because it's a podcast, but it's called the Moog One, which is just like a giant analog synth that sounds massive. And that the Moog, I'll often layer that with the brass sections, and so then you get that like pumping sound coming from the synth and the horns, and it gives it like a really kind of cool. I don't know, like, to me, like, that side chaining thing on this score is what I would sort of define as the SKYMED sound. It's like four on the floor kick, heavy orchestration, side chaining pumping off of the kick drum with like a ton of synthesis and stuff like that. So I mean, that's sort of the if I could sum it up in a rather long paragraph, that would be.
Yeah, that's great. It gives a really good
I mean,
insight. Yeah.
yeah, like that would be kind of it.
And what is your, say, musical background like? Did you start off playing like a lot of instruments like from a really young age? Because I know with a lot of composers, quite a few of them are like classically trained as well, aren't they? Tell me more about your early kind of background in that, and what composers inspire you.
Cool. Yeah, so like I started playing piano when I was a kid, and I did the whole piano grade conservatory thing, which, I mean, frankly, I didn't really enjoy. It was a lot of stuffy classical stuff. I remember the day I got to learn a Bryan Adams song on piano was like the greatest day of my life, up until that
I love
point.
that.
Yeah, I think my teacher was just like, let's just give Peter something that he enjoys for once, rather than all of this like stuffy Baroque classical stuff. But then it was like when I was 12. I remember it was like my Beatles on Ed Sullivan moment. I saw Nirvana play on Saturday Night Live, and I was just done with piano after that. And I was like, give me a guitar right now. I don't want to. I'm never playing piano again. I remember that night I like went down to the basement and poured bleach all over my jeans. It was ridiculous. But yeah, I was never going back. And so then I played guitar all through junior high and high school, and I actually played in like an instrumental surf rock band and some punk bands. But then I got back into keyboards when I was in university. And then that's when my like unhealthy obsession with synthesizers started to grow. And I started collecting synths, and I worked in a used guitar and synth store. So I was constantly being exposed to all of these instruments. And also in junior high, my father for Christmas bought me a 4-track, and that was where like my love of recording and production came about. So that was like 95 or 96. So I was just filling these cassette tapes with these ridiculous songs that I was
Mm.
writing, which I would never ever want to subject anybody to. But it taught me, the basics of recording. And then once I got into scoring, it was like then the pressure was on, and now I had to deliver. I had to basically take all of these skills and start delivering these scores, and it became really clear really quick where my deficiencies were.
Mm.
Um, like you're under the pressure, you got to deliver these scores, and you start to notice like, man, like my harmonic theory kind of sucks. It's not what it could be, or my orchestration is lacking. And so ever since, like for as long as I've been scoring, anytime I'm not working on a show, I'm usually studying. So
Wow.
like I studied for about 5 years. I studied jazz piano again, like much later in life, just to like get all of my harmonic theory up. I've studied orchestration. I've taken orchestration classes from a guy named Ludwin in Los Angeles. And yeah, like so a lot of it is self-taught, honestly. Like I never went to school for writing
Mm.
or for composing. It's all sort of me writing music, figuring out what I suck at, and then like taking courses to get better at it.
But that's good. It seems like you literally do like eat, sleep, breathe what you do, because you still study it even outside of working in it as well. Um, do you find like with the theory, and having a really good basis on the theory side has really also helped your scoring side of things for and the composing, having that really good theory basis?
Yes, I mean the thing is you can do it without. Like when I first started, I was just doing everything by ear, and
Yeah.
and when I go back and listen to the stuff I was writing, um, I'm still very pleased with it. What theory allows you to do though is you can a write faster, because
Mm.
you understand, you're not just sort of relying on your ear, you understand the sort of structure that you're working in. So in a weird way, it kind of limits what you can do, and you go like, oh well, I'm doing this, so I know that these are the things that work here, and I can execute it faster. So that's kind of the main thing that theory helps, and then it also allows you to explore a little bit. Like if you're getting stuck in a rut and you find yourself kind of going back to the same ideas, you can kind of analyze what you're doing and then maybe use a bit of theory to break out of it, come up with some different ideas, reharmonize things. But the big thing for me is speed. I just found that it helped me write faster because I understood what I was doing rather than just kind of winging it with my ear.
Yeah, for sure. I always struggled. I studied music. I always struggled a lot with theory. I remember learning about the cycle of fifths and things like that. But
Oh yeah,
it probably as well like helps understand like all the different scales and modes and things like that, doesn't it? To know also what's available to you to work with, right? And the
totally.
harmonies.
And there are so many cliches that, I mean, they're cliches for good reason. So like, oh, it's a magical moment. I'm going to play a whole tone scale. Like you can quickly deduce sort of what like you can quickly narrow down, because like having infinite ideas is awful. So when you can kind of lean on tried and true scales and chord tones, then it makes your job easier. And in a weird way, it kind of makes your scores fit with what people expect to hear from a score. Like there are lots of conventions that are used a lot, and they're used because they work.
Do you have typical like go to keys that you write in, or also like scales and things that you tend to use a lot?
I think I write too much in A.
Mm.
I don't know, muscle memory. I just sit down. I actually just finished a little EP that I'm working on, and I realized that like almost all the songs are in A. I think it comes from playing guitar, where I would always just write everything in A. No reason, like there's no good reason for it other
That's
than
why I
sheer
asked, because
laziness.
it's quite common.
Yeah, no, it's laziness and muscle memory. But yeah, I mean, other than that, no, anything goes really, I think.
Who
I mean,
who
it really depends on the cue.
who inspires you?
There have been a bunch of different composers over the course of my career that I found inspiring. Danny Elfman and Mark Mothersbaugh, I've always loved because in a weird way, like I feel a little bit of a kinship with them, in that they're kind of like the weirdos that played in weirdo bands that, you know, kind of came out composing from a bit of a odd approach, and and now write these really amazing scores. And there's just something about their sort of their personalities and their backstories that I've always found really interesting. And I love Danny Elfman's score, and I was a huge Devo fan, and I think Mark Mothersbaugh's hilarious. So there's something about those two that just from like a personal level, I kind of look at them and I'm like, well, if they can do it, I can do it.
Nice.
But then like there are some others like I've been really into Henry Jackman for a long time. He's
Mm.
like an ex Hans Zimmer collaborator. I really love his use of. He can go really. He can go like super synthy or super kind of golden age orchestral with like just like by snapping his fingers, which I really love. Um, also, I'm looking through a bunch of. I've got like a bunch of playlists here of people that I really enjoy. Um, some of the Brian Tyler stuff I really love. Some of the Tyler Bates stuff I really love. Um,
Nice.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, those are all
I
kind of
agree.
like Al, those are all like modern composers. Alan Silvestri, he was sort of the first guy I really fell in love with. I remember like I would go for runs and listen to the Back to the Future soundtrack. And it's like you can follow along with the story just by listening to the score. It's so well done. Like you can tell exactly what's happening
Mm,
just by what he's doing with that orchestra, which I also uh, I find really amazing.
thank you. And Victoria, what supervisor in and their work inspires you? And what kind of particular scene is a standout for you?
Um, I don't really know, like, if anyone in particular inspires me. It's kind of haven't really thought about that before. I'm also really
Mm.
bad with remembering names.
Is there
But
any like particular like film or TV series that you've watched or seen and you just like the music in this is really awesome?
like Stranger Things, Big Little
Yeah.
Lies, it's got really good music in it. But
Mm.
yeah, I can't really
Laura
think about
Felder.
anything. I kind of just like, yeah, I guess those ones. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's amazing
Mhm.
what,
Yeah, you got
music
your
for that.
like they can get any songs they want in there, right? Like
Yes. I think everyone's like fighting to be in the show, but now aren't they really? Um,
Yeah.
so let's discuss a little bit more about the SkyMed side of things. So, what has been the audience reaction to the music used? in the series, like on that side of things? Do you generally keep track on the audience and their reaction to the music used on the show? Do you tend to track that? Do you not? What kind of feedback and stuff have you had from that?
I haven't really tracked it. Yeah, I mean, I haven't gotten. I can't say that like my DMs have been blowing up over the SKYMED score. Um, with
do you do you release it like do you release it like separately as a soundtrack from the show?
we haven't we haven't done that, and I think we should because there is some really great stuff in there. The problem is that
Yeah,
Rob and I are just like we're so busy. Like we're both just barely
yeah.
keeping it together, and I've been wanting to release soundtracks for projects that I've had for ages, but I just feel like I'm like everything I'm doing is constantly overlapping, and I don't know, man. I've got two kids at home and I just don't have the time. It's just
Mhm.
exhausting, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
Mhm.
is it might be worth linking up with like a label or something to get them to maybe release it, or a
Yeah, also
distribution
it
company.
kind of gets complicated. It gets a bit complicated with the because the songs are all owned by the production company.
Mm.
So it's kind of up to them to do it. Um,
And that's a
sort
good
of their
segue.
responsibility.
Like in terms of say the rights and things like that, because I know obviously like under contract you can probably only say like so much, but what typically is, you know, how do you tend to work in terms of say like the right side of things and say royalties versus like buyouts? I mean, you can either talk about like what it is like with this series or just generalized and advice for also any other composers on that side of things as well, because and how they can then help themselves negotiate on things when working on new projects.
These days, the standard seems to be that when you sign paper for a major television show, they basically own everything. They take
Mm.
the publishing and ownership of the tracks, but you retain your songwriter share. Um, that is pretty standard these days. I don't love it, but it's just kind of the way it is.
Mm.
All like straight buyouts, I just won't do.
Mm.
Like there are certain things that I've kind of drawn lines in the sand. I won't do total buyouts, and I also won't give up my writer's share to anybody who didn't write the music. Those are like two like hills that I'll die on.
Mm.
Um, and then there's even something that's been happening. I've been seeing happen lately is there's direct licensing that's been happening, which is also very problematic. And I've been trying to figure out how to kind of protect myself from that. And that's where a production company will license something directly to the bypass SOCAN or ASCAP or BMI or whoever the royalty collectors are. Um, and they can essentially cut you completely out of all of your back end. And that's started happening. And that's something that I'm trying to figure out. We're trying to figure out how to like be aware of and how to protect yourself from that. Um,
So the
but I
internet,
mean, that being
the Wi-Fi just
sorry.
the Wi-Fi went a bit funny then. So I'll just repeat what I think that you said. So they are productions are now licensing directly with the PROs to license the individual tracks, and then did you say cut you out of that?
So no, they cut the PROs out completely and they do it directly with the network. So the production company
Uh,
will directly license something to the network and sort of figure out the licensing, a private licensing deal. So at that point, the PROs aren't collecting and aren't distributing. And what can happen there is they can be like, all right, well, we're just going to license it to you for $1. and
What? Wow.
and so suddenly, and that just completely eliminates the back end. It's that this kind of stuff is happening a lot. Like I feel like all the networks are really trying to figure out ways to pay less money to the composers, pay less pay less royalties. Everybody, like I just feel like everywhere you turn, someone's trying to like take a piece of something or eliminate it, and it's pretty stressful. And now with AI coming, it's also pretty scary. But those are like hills, yeah, that like I said, that I'll die on. And it's,
Mm.
I'm at the point where I'll turn down major projects if those are the conditions.
And then maybe perhaps if enough people stand by that, that's what helps promote change, right?
Yeah, I mean it's tough because when you're starting out, you just want to get anything you can.
Yeah.
But it's yeah, it's definitely problematic.
And do you feel
But
this?
yeah, that's typically what I'm seeing.
Is there a sense of like, okay, well, if you're not willing to do this, then we will just find someone that will?
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. That's sort of the reality. I mean, I like to think, and without sounding too full of myself,
Mm.
I like to think I'm good at what I do. And
Mhm.
so it's like, if you want, and if you're gonna find somebody that is willing to do it, like give up all of those rights. My sentiment is that it's going to be somebody who's starting off their career and may not
Yeah.
be aware. So you're kind of gonna, you might run into, you might get what you pay for, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Mm.
but yeah, there is, I mean, I think everybody's trying to spread awareness about these issues. At least, like, I'm in something called the Screen Composers Guild of Canada, and that's a
Yeah,
big,
I know that one. Yeah.
um, yeah, like these are things that we've discussed a lot to try to make people aware of, and know your rights and try to stand by them.
Mm. And Victoria, what's your thoughts on that? And what are some of the common issues you see? Because I know you're involved in the Supervisor Guild in
Mhm.
Canada. What are your thoughts on this particular issue, and what kind of issues do you kind of see at the moment on the supervision side that is working as a whole to change?
I mean, we're always dealing with like union changes with the unions and how to navigate that. I mean, we want to pay the musicians, of course, what
Mm.
what they're worth, but the labels make deals with the unions, and then we're like, oh, there's these extra fees now and those, and we got to like put that into our budget as well.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I don't think they should be taking away from the artists at
Mm.
all. Yeah, it's tricky.
And how much music do you tend to license, like union versus non-union?
Well, anything with a majors label's going to have union fees generally
Mm.
in North America. So a lot of the time, really.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's just something you just have to take into consideration in the budget. There's been a few times where the master fee's been over 7,500, so I've reached out to the AFM and asked what the union fees are, and it's like, oh, well, there was an orchestra on it, so it's like another $10,000. And in that
Oh,
case, it's
wow.
like, I mean, we just can't afford that sometimes.
Mm.
So then sometimes the artist might have a re-record and you sort of go down that path. Um, but yeah,
Mm. It just
just
creates a lot
always something to
more
think
spanners
about.
in the works. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
so,
ran into
go on.
sorry, I ran into something specifically to what Victoria was just saying. I was on a project and they wanted to license the good, the bad, the ugly. Um, but yeah, it was because it was a union recording.
Hmm.
In addition to the licensing fees, just to pay the orchestra was like the whole thing was. And this was a show. This was the show that could license Britney Spears, and
Mm.
they couldn't afford Good, the Bad, the Ugly. So they got me to do a re-record of it. So I did this wicked re-record. Like I hired all the right players. It sounded so good. It had like the tape hiss. It sounded lo-fi. Like you almost could not tell the difference when you put it up against the original. But the owners of Good, the Bad, the Ugly wanted to hear it, and they sent it in, and they denied our use of it
No.
because they had their own re-record of it that they wanted
Mhm.
us to pay for, and it wasn't as good as mine, which was the most frustrating part.
And sometimes they'll only allow, like, approve the publishing if you use their re-record,
Mm,
which I've dealt with, but it was working in my favor because this is the one where it was like, oh, well, we don't have to pay all those union fees, so of course we'll use your re-record.
yeah, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And how do you tend to deal with like MFN when licensing all the time?
I mean, it's generally always MFN, master and
Mm.
publishing. I'm like the music docu-series that I mentioned, Paid in Full. That's, whenever you're doing like a music docu-series, it's kind of got a lot of big songs in it all throughout the series. That's when we're going to do MFN all songs. It's
Mm,
only fair.
mm.
Um, unless you're using like a cover version, and then obviously it's not going to be MFN publishing.
Yeah,
But, mhm.
yeah, of course. And so let's discuss like any other project. Like, do you both have any other projects outside of SkyMed that you have going on at the moment?
I will have this Paid in Full
Uh,
one. I'm doing an indie movie called Sweetness, written and directed by Emma Higgins. And one I'm really excited about is Mae Martin's new series for Netflix, Wayward. Like, I'm a big Mae Martin fan of all their stand-up and Feel Good and the podcast. So that's a really exciting one that we're just kind of starting to get into right now.
Nice. What about
Mhm.
you, Peter?
um, I just finished two projects. I just finished. We did a Winona Earp film, which I'm super excited about. Uh, and I also it was funny while I was doing the Winona Earp film, I was also doing a kids show called Go Togo, which is about like little animatronic subway trains and streetcars and buses. And so it was like in the morning I would be scoring, demons ripping people's hearts out and lighting them on fire, and then in the afternoon I'd be like scoring little trains talking about the difference between like up and down and red, blue, and green and the different primary colors. So that was like kind of weird a weird thing. So those I just finished, and I think we're going to be seeing those coming out in the fall. And other than that, yeah, I'm going all in on SkyMed right now. We've just started getting walks, and it's what I've started working on for season 3, and I'm really excited about it.
Nice. And so can you tell us more about the where you're at in terms of like musically, how you feel about the creative side of it with the musical landscape for season 3?
For me, yeah, I mean, every season we just kind of try to up the ante a little bit, try to make it bigger and crazier and more intense. The thing about SkyMed that's really great is because we have so much support from the showrunner, um, she really lets us get kind of weird uh, on the score. So we get to experiment a lot and do a
And
lot
that's
of
great
weird.
that you
Yeah, so it's like, and I feel like, when you have that kind of leeway
Hmm.
creatively, um, I find when I know I have a very long leash, I'll use it, and I
Hmm.
tend to come up with some of the best music. Like the Winona Earp film that I just finished. That like we have such a long history with them, and we have so much trust. They have so much trust in us that I went really hard and I wrote some of my favorite cues of the whole series on that movie. And I feel like when you give a composer that kind of freedom, I think you're going to get the best music. And I feel like we're getting there with SkyMed. I mean, we've already been there, but now we're getting into the like, let's see how how far we can push this. So I'm pretty excited about season 3. I think it's going to be a fun, a fun season.
Victoria, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm feeling excited about it. It's just like I had said, the showrunner's really great to deal with. We know the tastes, we know the process. It's all running smoothly so far. It's an exciting season. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into it further. We've just spotted like the first 2 episodes, and we're working on clearing a bunch of songs for that. And yeah.
Amazing. All right. So if there's anyone that wants to find out any more, that listens to this, how would they then get in touch?
For me, I've got a website, www.peterchapman.ca. You can go there, and I think there's a way you can contact me there. So you can shoot me an email and browse around and poke at some stuff.
And people can also come through me as well, to be like a middle person, so you don't get bombarded with things as well. So Victoria, what about you?
I don't have a website, but The Wilders is thewilders.tv. You can go visit that, get in touch, see what everyone's working on, see what we do, that kind of thing.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So I'm just
Thank you.
if we just gonna